Hello. Today I'm going to talk about a book that I wrote called Odysseus, the Epic Myth of the Hero. Cover looks like this. This is a book that I wrote about 10 years ago. It's hard to believe. It was an absolute joy to write. I had a lot of fun writing it. Purpose of this video is to announce that I'm going to read it out loud, and I'm going to publish, once I get it all done and up, I'm going to publish it for day by day, an installment. And so including this particular section or this particular video, there's going to be 24. Some of them are quite short, some of them are a little bit longer. I don't think any of them are going to be much more than 10 or 15 minutes at the very most, and some are going to be as short as a minute, so it depends. So there's like I say, there'll be 24 of them in all, including this one. I often get asked when I meet new people, or when I talk to old friends, is, what's a grown man like you got to do with mythology? Which is generally looked upon as something that's better suited for children. Well, I don't agree with that, and ultimately I can't answer that question. I can talk all around it, but it just gets to a point like trying to explain why you like a certain kind of a food versus another. And I think that's the key to understanding why you love it so much. I think if you could really nail it down and explain it, I don't think you can with your true loves and your true likes. I don't know why I love mythology, but I always have. And it has been it's perennially refreshing to me. I feel like I'm digging into the wellspring of thoughts and ideas and so many things. It's opened up many areas of my life. It's given me insight. And I find that this is generally shared. I taught school, and it's hard to find kids that are not really interested in mythology. I think adults are as well. A little more embarrassed to come out with it, though, because it seems like it's a thing for kids. Mythology is not for kids. Okay, so how did I come to write this book? I took up the study of ancient Greek very, very seriously about 15 years ago. I had worked on it, off and on for fun, but I thought, hey, someday I may go back and try to get an advanced degree and, try to teach classics in some area of classics, probably, literature, poetry, history, perhaps a language. Anyway, so I started on my own to learn Greek. So there's no better way to learn a quote-unquote dead language, because ancient Greek is not a spoken tongue any longer. And modern spoken Greek is an insight, but it's substantially different. It's substantially different, especially Homeric Greek. Anyway, I thought the best way is to start. Why not translate something? So I went to the Odyssey, and I bought a Loeb Odyssey, which has the Greek on one side and the English on another. And then I discovered this wonderful site, Perseus, which is hosted by Tufts University back in Boston. And it's a magnificent site. If you are interested in the classics and you want to read them in the original language, Perseus is a great site. Very helpful. Ton of resources there. And, most of Greek and Latin literature is there in the original languages, and every single word is translated for you. So what I did, kind of an arduous task, but it really took me less time than I thought it was. I first, on good old notebook paper, blue line notebook paper, to practice my Greek script, because it's a different alphabet, and it takes some practice to get fluent with it. I copied out book 4 of the Odyssey. I chose book 4 because it's the first time that in the Odyssey that Odysseus shows up. First 3 books are back home with Telemachus and Penelope and the suitors, and so book 4 is the first place in the Odyssey that we see Odysseus show up. He's on Calypso's Isle. So I thought, what the heck? I'll just translate that and see what's going on. Give me an appreciation for how Homer did his poetry, dactylic hexameter, all that kind of thing for you specialists. I thought I'd try to get my hands dirty with all that stuff. So I went through, and first I did a transliteration. I went through the Greek, and I transliterated it, put the part of speech, and you know, I got to the end of that, and like I say, that went a lot easier and quicker than I thought it would. I thought, okay, now's the time to actually translate it into readable English. Well, I started out very quickly just to do a prose translation. I really never thought I'd do much more than that, but I became very quickly dissatisfied with it, and I actually preferred reading the transliterated version, because I go between the Greek and the English, and actually the prose one just didn't do much for me. So I thought, well, what the heck? You know, this thing is a poem. The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer are poems. It's important to remember that they were not written. They were composed orally, in public, okay, not in private. They're composed on the spot. So there's something akin to rap in how these things came about. They were composed in front of audiences live, okay, and through repetition and through practice. You know, best practices became common, and it roughly shaped itself. It took the shape that it is today, as a public performance, as an oral performance. So I thought, okay, I've got to render this in poetry, and I thought, how am I going to do it? I didn't want to try to do heroic couplets like Alexander Pope did. I just thought, okay, I'll give it a natural. I'll try to you know, copy the feeling of Homer as much as I could. And so the vehicle in English poetry that allowed me to do this well was Marlowe's mighty line. Okay, was this the face that launched 1,000 ships? 10-syllable line. It's iambic pentameter. Dirty word to some people, who, you know, not to me. So I started to render what I had translated, this mass of translated material, transliterated material. I started to render it into iambic pentameter, and excuse me, found that it wasn't that hard for me. Okay, and as I was going along doing this again, it was not the transliteration where this incident popped out at me. It's when I was doing my own version of Book 4 that I came upon this passage where Odysseus is dumped off his raft by Poseidon. Poseidon, the god of the sea, hates Odysseus because Odysseus blinded his monstrous son Polyphemus. So Poseidon can't kill Odysseus, but he can make his life miserable. So what he does is he wrecks his raft, excuse me, and Odysseus is swimming alone in the ocean, open ocean, out of sight of land. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, the guy's had a lot of adventures. He's been through a lot of things. This had to be the worst one, okay? Where he stood, you know, hardly a chance to survive. Middle of the ocean, no help, no companions, all alone, hanging to a piece of driftwood and hoping that he's going to make it. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to put myself in that situation, I'm quite sure I'd be reviewing my life and how and why I ended up in that particular location to you know, have such a lonely, lost death. And so, you know, with that in mind, I thought, okay, I'm gonna rewrite this story. I'm gonna do my own version, because in actual fact, when you look at the entire biography of Odysseus, very, very little of it is told by Homer. Homer, you know, he wrote the major work on the man's life, but it leaves out so much, so many fascinating details. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll try to compile this into some kind of story and use the incidences of his life to, you know, try to justify to himself how he ended up where he was in the open ocean swimming. Excuse me again. So I, you know, I took it from this angle and I began to, you know, go out of Homer. I started out with a translated version of Homer in passages, and then I dovetailed what I wanted to write, and I worked it in there. And so, you know, hopefully there's a seamless dovetail between translated parts of Homer and what I ended up writing as my own original poetry. In the book, the italicized portions are translations, and the rest of it are my original poetry. So the vast majority of the book is not italicized. Very little is actually translated. But I wanted to be honest about it, and to give people who know the language can judge. Was the transition smooth? Was it well done or not? It's easy to see, especially if you speak the Greek. You'd be able to compare my translation with yours or whatever, and see how I did. I would get up very early in the morning before work. I was working at Coast Union High School as a Spanish and English teacher. I was raised in my family in Cambria, California, and I'd wake up in the morning. I'd go out on the deck with a cup of coffee. Sometimes I'd build a fire. On weekends, I'd build a fire. Other times, I'd just, sit out there in the cold, but it was okay. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being outside. I wrote it in pencil on notebook paper, blue line notebook paper, and I just worked on it. Worked on it for a couple of years, and all of a sudden, it was done. And I was very happy with it, but I wasn't quite sure what to do. But I thought, okay, I better type this up now. So it was at that point I typed it all up and saved it on a computer. And I made some efforts to try to get it published. Most people just laughed in my face, And but I did get some really nice responses, but they were always of the nature, love it, it's interesting, it's just impractical. It's amazing that you spent so much time on such a project that had such a small chance for commercial success. So, again, why would I dedicate myself to something like that? I don't know. I had money coming in because I was a teacher. I guess I didn't. I guess it's a labor of love, Okay. But anyway, so, that's where it was. It was in manuscript in a cool black folder with zipper around it. And I thought, okay, well, somebody will find it maybe someday after I'm gone, and who knows what they'll do with it. I didn't really have much faith that I was going to be able to get it published in any kind of a commercial publishing house. But, life goes along. Lots of upheavals happen in my life, and I found myself single on my own. And I met Annika, my present wife, and when you're meeting a new girl, you're bragging about the kind of stuff you could do. I was bragging. I wrote a book, and she goes, "Oh, well, read it to me, especially if it's poetry." So I did, and surprisingly, she really loved it, and I think it was genuine past the point of hey, I like this guy, so I got to like his work. She just by the way we talked about it, I thought hey, I think she's got a genuine interest. So kind of gave me confidence that maybe I had done something worthwhile here, rather than just an exercise in antiquarian studies. Because it's my contention that this is an extremely modern poem. Okay, you're going to have to decide for yourself that. Even though it's in iambic pentameter and it's mythology, I think it's very modern. Okay, I'm going to try. I see I'm getting a little long in this. I'm trying to cut this down. So anyway, I don't want it to go too long. What I did was I self-published it, and Annika and I started to work on all the graphics. We did all the graphics. I did most of the internal graphics because they're pretty simple. But we worked on this cover, which I'm really pleased with the way the cover came out. I think it's so cool. Now, Annika works on her family's magazine, Black and White magazine, and it's an artistic photography magazine started by her father, who's a really outstanding painter, and Annika herself is quite an accomplished painter. So I learned to really trust her photographic eye. And we had such fun. We spent like about an 18-hour day working on this until we came up with that. And I think that's when we realized that even though we don't know each other very well, we're pretty good friends and we're best friends. So we ended up married. and we're still pretty good friends. So, I guess that's all I want to say on this. As far as that's concerned, I'm trying to think if I've got anything else I want to share about this, other than the fact that what I'm going to do here, what I intend to do is, after I finish with this, I want to read it aloud. This was written to be read aloud. It's to be listened to. I was very inspired by epic singers and how they compose orally in public. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not doing that actually. I'm kind of writing just what you would classically think of as poetry. You know, one guy alone in a room, you know, a lonely room, and trying to get his thoughts out on paper, which is not how these poems were originally composed. But I thought, okay, I want to acknowledge that it's an oral work, okay? And so I think the only way that you can really appreciate it is it's got to be read out loud. So what I'm going to do is read it out loud. I'm going to publish these, post them on my Facebook page and my YouTube page. I'm going to have 24 of these, including this particular little introduction about what I'm trying to do, and then I'm going to, you know, once I get the whole thing done, I'm going to post them one by one, and you know, you can give it a listen if you like. If the story catches you, you'll be able to listen to the whole thing from the beginning to the middle and the end. And you know, as I've tried to write other things subsequently, nothing has been as much fun as this. This just seemed like a pure exercise in pure poetry for the sheer love of poetry and mythology. And so I've never quite had as wonderful an experience of writing as I did writing this, Odysseus, the epic myth of the hero. I think I came up with a unique look at his life. And again, I think it's extremely modern. So I hope you'll listen, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to cut it off now, and I'll stick the cover up here one more time for you to look at it. Okay, that's that. And I'm going to sign off now and go read the preface to you. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.